Welcome everyone to this month's winter webinar hosted by TIAH, focused on understanding farm finances. So today we're delving into the details of sort of key aspects of farm financial management, including how to create and interpret financial statements, budgeting strategies, maybe some tax planning considerations, and just explaining the importance of accounting terms. And our experts, who I'll introduce in a second, will be addressing how to evaluate farm profitability, calculating financial ratios, and hopefully equip you to use this information for decision making. So thank you very much for joining us today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's speakers. So first, please meet Christine Thompson of ABT, which stands for Agricultural Business Training. Christine and her husband are tenants on a 370-acre farm on the edge of the North York Moors. They've got some grazing livestock as well as some arable crops. And over the years, Christine has gained experience as a farm secretary and delivered training to farming families and farming administrators before establishing ABT a few years ago. Christine has found that many farming families lack the confidence in their business skills, which is really the main driving force behind her passion for subjects like the one that we're talking about today. So welcome, Christine. Thank you. And we're also joined by Mel Shipley, who is a Senior Agricultural Relationship Manager with Oxbury Bank. Mel is also from a farming background, having grown up on her family's sheep, arable and dairy support farm in New Zealand, and then having worked for the Bank of New Zealand as an agribusiness partner after university. She then made the, I'm going to say, questionable decision to move to the UK. Mel secured a position as the National Agricultural Support Manager at HSBC before joining Oxbury Bank, and is now focused on maintaining growth and managing customer relationships. Welcome, Mel. And finally, I'm Linda. I'm your host for today, head of membership here at TIAH. So let's just kick off. And Christine, I'll start with you. Can we just maybe start with finding out a little bit about why you feel understanding your finances as a farming business is so important?
Yeah, well, I would say firstly, it is one of the basic things that any business needs to be on top of, doesn't it? However, as we all know, farming has a lot of its own little idiosyncrasies, including the recent removal of subsidies and dealing payments that have been present for nearly 60 years now, and that have formed quite a large part of our income. But as I say, we're undergoing a massive change all around. We often aren't in complete control of the prices we get for our produce, and given the fact that we all possibly have just around 7,200 probably maximum left to receive in dealing payments, we're having to review our business practices. These massive changes have affected ourselves as tenant farmers. In 2020, we received about £48,500 per year in subsidies. We were then farming just over 500 acres, and that almost covered our rent. But however, this figure has reduced very quickly through the ATP, and whilst we all farm what we do because of where we live, we have to ascertain just how the business is currently performing and what we have to do to replace that income, be it either finding alternative sources or changing the practices. So I think carrying on doing what we've always done probably isn't going to be sustainable anymore. So it's vital that we all know the financial terminology, and more importantly, how to ensure that the figures that we pass to our financial advisors, such as Mel, are actually accurate, rather than, dare I say, the back of fag packet estimates. And straight away, I think Mel and her colleagues will appreciate that straight away. So, you know, it's all coming into the play at this moment in time. Yeah.
And Mel, from your standpoint, obviously coming from the bank, why is it so important to get under the skin of your finances when dealing with folks like yourself?
Absolutely. So it is really important, and we don't stress it enough. And it is something that's quite challenging in multi-generational farming businesses, because quite often we see, you know, the elder generation has the checkbook or the purse strings, for want of the better term, and you know, it is slow to pass down to the next sort of generation and with succession and that type of thing. For us, when we are assessing businesses, what we want to know is that the management team that's in place, regardless of how that is structured, understand both the agronomic and the financial performance of the business and how those two things interact. Because at the end of the day, sort of as Christine has alluded to, you know, the industry is changing. All of the sectors are being impacted by different different sort of events, different risks, different volatility. You know, the weather and climate is something that are front of everybody's minds at the moment. You know, there's more and more rain, you know, we're not getting as much through the summer, that type of thing. And that has an impact on our financial position as well as the sort of the farm performance as well. So one of the things that I always say is, you know, back of the fag packet doesn't exist anymore. We are needing to see some professionalisation when it comes to presenting to a bank and presenting financial information. How you do it is sort of entirely up to you, and I think we'll get onto that a little bit later on. But the key thing for me is, you know, if you're coming to the bank to ask for money, we need you to be 100% bought in, because there is a risk assessment that we need to do in the background, and primarily within that is the affordability. So is the money that's being requested serviceable? Can your business afford to pay that back to us? And then the security aspect of it. The affordability is the key piece, though, especially in today's age. You know, we need to understand exactly how the money is going to be paid back. You know, if you tell us that you've got a farm worth £3.5 million or whatever, that's awesome, but the farm itself isn't going to pay it back. It's the people working it that will get us that money. So for me, the key thing when I'm looking at a business is the people behind it. Are you 100% bought in? Do you understand the numbers? Do you understand what's going on farm? And have that owned by the management team of the business rather than the professionals. I totally understand and support the idea of, you know, professionals being involved in decision making and supporting farmers through the expansions and the investments and succession, that type of thing. But at the end of the day, the farm management team are the ones that are driving the business. They need to understand it 100%.
Yeah, makes sense. So I guess sort of one of the first questions would be, if you're brand new to this, like you've got no experience, where do you even start? You know, for me, I assume it's things like looking at, you know, your debt, you know, what are my profits, but how do you start if you've never even been exposed to financial statements in the past? Like where do you begin?
Absolutely agree with everything there. Any business should really be able to extract the debtors and the creditors at the press of a button, really. Other mainstream businesses, you know, we also have regular finance meetings with the team, and as many farming businesses are run by a very small team, as Mel said, it is a very small management part of it. It might even be just one person, or it could be various members of the family there. It can be hard to be on top of things, you know, because we don't have those finance departments that other businesses do. But I always like to look at it in the same way that we have to have the right equipment in the field. We also have to mirror that in the office as well. And so to ensure really that the correct systems are in place to achieve that vital information that we all need. I think we also need to look a little bit closer at the audited accounts, as they always tell us a lot about the direction in which our businesses are heading. It's very, very easy, isn't it? So by the time you get your final accounts, the accountant has told you how much tax you have to pay, or if you're going to get any back. And then they just sort of get put away in the filing cabinet, never to come out again until somebody does ask for them. But they are, you know, they are a vital, important part of planning and moving forward there. We all know as farmers really that the input and the output prices vary greatly, probably month to month, but definitely year to year. So looking back at the accounts over, say, 5 years enables us to see the general trend within our businesses, which are essentially long term. I would imagine the performance and financial ratios used by Mel and her colleagues all do stem, I think, she'll correct me if I'm wrong, from those audited accounts, you know, and so again, it is vital that we understand how they've been compiled, you know, for the legislative tax reasons for HMRC, but again for the management purposes for ourselves as well. You mentioned profits, Linda, there. I think it's probably fair to say, I'll stand corrected, but the majority of farming businesses out there follow a partnership structure. This has been advised by accountants for various reasons over the years. And as far as those profits are concerned, for the partnerships, that profit is what all partners have to live out of. They have to pay the income tax out of that. It is basically a salary. The profit also repays loans, and if there's any existing loans as well. And then if there is anything left at the end of the day, it does provide funds to reinvest in the business. So, it's getting the right particular system helps a lot for those people sort of doing the work on the farm and enabling those management decisions. I sometimes think that, we all should set time aside, perhaps once a month or whatever, around the kitchen table, to discuss these things like other mainstream businesses do. But we spend a lot of time chatting, but never really setting time aside to get to the nitty-gritty of everything, really.
Yeah. And I guess, you've already used some financial terminology there. If you really aren't sure, I heard something the other day, percentage equity and things, if these are not terms that you understand, is it okay to go to the bank and say, I don't know what this is, or Christine, do we need somebody like you to kind of come in and do that basic education?
I honestly think whether your financial advisors, your accountants, anybody is willing to help you out with that, because at least it gives them the confidence that you have got that interest, as Mel was saying earlier, that you are invested in it all. Of course, training does come in useful. We compiled, I think, quite a while ago, Linda, a short webinar within TIAH. I think it's in the essential skills section. It's just a little training tool there which forms a base from which to start. In the room training is available throughout the country, really. A lot of the accredited courses are through UK Rural Skills and Lantra, again on the TIAH website. But as I say, speak to the accountant, speak to the financial advisor, because they will be absolutely pleased that you are becoming more involved in it all.
Yeah,
I think also, Linda, I was just going to say that bit is really important from my perspective as well. Like, just don't be afraid to ask if you're not sure, because I mean, there's a number of occasions that I could list off where I've been out on farm and, information either hasn't been divulged because, well, it hasn't been told to us, or they haven't asked the question because they didn't want us to be thinking any worse of them or anything like that. Like, whereas actually, for me to be able to support you, I need to understand where you're at. And then I need to understand what's going on as a whole. And that's the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. If I'm going to help you, I need to know the full picture. So asking the question, I mean, I Google things all the time. Investopedia.com is one of my favorite websites.
So can you share any examples of where you've had a situation where you think, oh goodness, why has this not been raised before? Just to kind of put it into context, is there anything that comes to mind? Sorry to put you on the spot, but
yeah. Speaking to the people that we speak to, we all know that farmers are a very proud bunch out there, and we often don't like the feeling that, as Mel said, that we do understand what we're doing, but that terminology and everything like that just sometimes holds us back a little bit. And I know in our sessions that we run, we sort of say, this is a terminology to give you the confidence to speak to people. Instead, quite often is the case that when we meet with our accountants or other people, we're looking at them as the experts, and so we just sit there and go, yeah, whatever you say, without having that confidence to really admit, as Mel says, it's the good, bad, and the ugly. That we have to be honest with each other, otherwise they can't give us the advice that we're needing. It's a two-way thing.
Yeah, for sure. Mel, just kind of coming back to, you'd mentioned a couple times earlier on about the management team. I'm just wondering, in terms of, is that who you see who should be responsible for these sort of financial records? And if you don't recognize management team as what your farming business looks like, who are those people?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I refer to management team, they are the people that are driving the business. So whether that is the partners in the business, it could be mum, dad, children, grandparents, mum, dad, and children. The limited company, we are starting to see sort of the larger, more progressive businesses start to adopt more corporate structures in the way that they manage their businesses. So sitting down for monthly board meetings, I am regularly attending a lot of my customers either monthly or quarterly meetings to have sort of run through the numbers with them, so we're ahead of the curve in terms of where we're going. We can understand where the budget is now based on what we've already done, that type of thing. So there's a continual conversation going on. But to what Christine said, it's setting that time aside and making it a priority to discuss the financial performance. So let's go through this month's books and see where we're at, even if it's just looking at the VAT return, but knowing exactly where that is. So the management team for me is, the people driving the business, the ones that are on the farm running it. And that could be just the partners, the directors, shareholders, or it could include the financial, or not financial advisors in particular, but the professional team that is surrounding the business as well. So the accountants, solicitors, consultants, agronomists, nutritionists, anything like that. I would always say include your bank manager in that, because we are, it's really, really important we know what's going on as well. And typically we're the last. And we're the ones that sort of will make the decision on where the money is going to be sort of put and if it's coming to you. So get us involved as soon as possible, and take ownership of that. So yeah, I think it is really, really important to understand exactly where you're at financially. And I think if you're not 100% sure, so like sort of Christine said, we get the accounts, you know what tax you have to pay or what tax you're getting back. They go in a drawer unless the bank asks for them, and then typically, the accountant will forward through a copy. Sit down with your accountant at that point and go through it. Understand what they've put in repairs, understand what they've done to livestock adjustments and livestock valuations, which could impact on profitability. Understand what's gone into your drawings. Quite often, you see that sort of swing up and down year on year, and you've got capital being introduced, and, it is a number at the end of the year. But, when we ask questions, so, okay, we've seen that your drawings have gone up by 20,000 this year. What's happened? Quite often the response is, and I think 95% of the time the offense is, I've got no idea, you'll have to ask the accountant.
Really?
So, and that to me is really scary, because I remember when I started banking, I was a graduate, and we were running through sort of the rules of thumb, for want of a better term, and one of the guys that had been in the bank for 40 odd years, and he said the drawings thing, and this was a never fail sort of rule of thumb, was you look at the drawings and the accounts, you times that by 4, and that is the equivalent salary that you would need if you were working a 9 to 5. So when you start to look at it like that, and you ask yourself the question and look at it sort of front on, how many jobs are there out there that you could get a salary of 100,000 from the outset? There's not that many, really. So it's understanding exactly what has been allocated where, and sort of understanding creditors, debtors, are they sort of where they're meant to be? And knowing exactly what you've paid and what you haven't is also a good thing. Quite often we're getting invoices sent across, and you're like, you see that some of it's been paid, some of it hasn't, and then they've had another one, but that's been fully paid. So as keeping control of where your money is going. So I always say to sit down once a month, or if you've got a bookkeeper coming in to help you out with that, which is, absolutely brilliant. Just take the time to really try and upskill yourself and use the services that TIAH and ABT can offer, and the rest of, there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help.
Yeah. And so is that right then? So it's about once a month, but do we know how long? Is that sort of an hour out of your day? Or is that just how long is a piece of a string question?
It depends. I think it would really depend on the business and what you're doing. I think it is, if you're going through a project or an expansion, investing some money, looking at doing that, I would say, take time. Maybe it might take a couple of hours. But, if you set aside the morning and, finish early, brilliant. You've got a few hours back. But it's just getting into the habit of going through it.
Yeah, whether it's comfortable or not. So for both of you then, in terms of, obviously you can run your accounts and all sorts of things, but how do you go about choosing a finance platform? Or is it as simple as having a spreadsheet, or actually is this a decision for a professional? And how do people tackle that?
I think going sort of some years back, really, much of the financial recording on farms has started with the need to reclaim VAT. You know, sort of in my days as a farm secretary, I would have loved to have gone out to new customers and sort of said, right, what can we help you with? You know, and never did they sort of say to me, well, I'd like to have my gross margins on all the different enterprises on the farm. The most popular question was, how quickly can you get my VAT back, please? You know, because it is the driver. It's needed to keep the cash flow going. So I think since it was 2019, I think, when HMRC introduced Making VAT Digital, many people have already moved on to digital software, and that was it. It did have some good repercussions there, really, because as Mel said, you know, some probably Granny has been doing the bookkeeping for years and years, and sort of got a little bit of control over that, Grandad, whoever it was. But with Making VAT Digital, we had to use these software systems, and we did see a lot of multi-generational teams coming onto our webinars and training, because yes, this is your job from now on, because you know how to use a computer, but then, well, yes, I can do that, but I've no idea about bookkeeping, you know, so it has moved things on a little bit. There are still some people out there carrying out the work on spreadsheets, and that's absolutely fine. There was a lot of myths right at the start of Making VAT Digital, that you had to be on the cloud and things like that. But you still can use spreadsheets as long as you've got one of these application program interface, I think that's what it is, API anyway, that links that information that you're getting from your spreadsheet into the format of the HMRC system. So that has been working well. As I say, other people have moved on to the different software. But when we move towards Making Tax Digital, which is all set or scheduled for next year, 2026 sounded a long time off at one point, but it is just next year. It may be best to start to move on to the various platforms, because again, because of the industry, we're needing to extract that information alongside that basic legislative recording. And again, I would advise spending time researching each and every different software, all those platforms, just like you would do when buying a piece of machinery. You know, I've got a husband here who will spend hours looking on the internet for machinery, because it's what they're interested in, and it's a tool of the job. But this is an important piece of equipment as well, so it is important to do that research. There's the generic cloud software that, with some knowledge as well and help from the accountant, possibly you can get good enterprise gross margins out of that as well. In fact, agricultural accountants will help set your business up as templates.
Okay.
Because again, we've got our own little quirks in the industry. You know, what other business sells something to somebody and then the customer starts to make deductions, you know, from everything that you've sold. And so it's important that all the software systems can handle all those bits and pieces that make us a little bit different. The accountants can gain access to those as well, in the same way as the bespoke farming systems as well, because they're all on the cloud now. They're a little bit slow to catch up with the others, but they are all on the cloud now. And those software companies that do actually know farming and its oddities, and they've also got good support as well. So yeah, it's good. All of those platforms, Mel will probably need to see budgets and cash flows, and all those systems can produce those. Again, we spend all our time putting information into systems. How often do we look at the reports that we can get out? It's the same with software, isn't it? We sort of use the bits that we use and get the job over and done with, rather than looking in there. So they can all do that, and what better start to creating budgets going forward than to start with last year's actuals. I think the generic and the bespoke systems, they're all roughly around the same price now as well.
Okay.
So, you know, if you've got a relatively simple farming business, generic is fine. But if you've got a mixed farming business like we used to have, where, you know, you've got a lot of interaction between your enterprises. We used to grow barley, feed it to the cattle. So there's those mutually beneficial movements between your different enterprises that we do have to start looking into. Even though the money doesn't go through the bank, we still have to have the ability really there to take those into account. So if you're looking at a more complex system like that, look at the bespoke ones as well, but really look at them, see what you want out of a system. Don't just use one because the neighbour likes it as well. You might be running completely different systems, so yeah, research into them all. Yeah.
So we've had a question through which I'm suspecting you kind of can't answer, but it is essentially, what platforms would you recommend if you are just using Excel spreadsheets? But I guess it's, you know, you have to almost plug into Google the kind of system you need, or the sort of farming business you have, and hopefully then you'll get the different brand names come up. But it's a tricky one to say without context, isn't it?
It is, and to be quite honest, I know a lot of our training courses we're teaching the basics and things like that, and the feedback is, we'd love to have a look at all these systems, you know, but it is a case really of just doing your homework and knowing the right questions to ask the software companies as well.
And that's maybe where advice from somebody like Mel is important, because I certainly wouldn't know what questions to ask to figure out which platform would work best. So again, I don't know, Mel, if you have any experience in sort of trying to figure out what would be best.
I would first and foremost have a chat with your accountant to make sure that whatever system you are going to use aligns with what they're doing as well, and it's going to be usable. Because I mean, my mum at home, best example, we changed accountants and we had to move from Landmark onto Sage, I think it was. And you know, that was a pretty big deal for mum, because it was completely changing systems, reallocating a lot of costs, and you know, doing all of that. But you know, it has been worthwhile in the sense that we have now got so much more granularity and detail. We've got a very sort of mixed system. We're growing forage that goes into livestock that, you know, it's costing us money that doesn't get a return until sort of the livestock have gone. So, you know, it's got to be accounted for somewhere. So yeah, I'd have a chat with your consultants and your, you know, your accountants to make sure that what you're looking at is going to work for the systems that they're operating as well. And then sort of go from there and just do the research, because like Christine said, it's going to be different for every business, and depending on what system you're running, the scale that you're running at, if you're doing diversifications or if it is sort of just pure agriculture, there's a lot of different ones out there, and it is worth just spending some time and doing some research. From the budgeting perspective and monitoring, you know, they all have great reports, and you know, more and more often now banks are asking for quarterly management information, typically when there is an expansion or a large investment going on, so we can track the transition. I would say the key issue that we have with that, and to a certain extent with budgets as well, is accuracy with the data that's included in it. Or more often than not, I get to the end of the report and there's a line at the bottom saying unallocated. And I just, it always just makes me sigh a little, because, you know, I need it to be allocated so I can see what's actually happening. We do follow, you know, sort of profitability and cash quite closely to understand exactly where the business is standing, and the affordability of all the commitments. That's not just debt, that's, you know, feed, animal feed, you know, crops, cropping expenses, all of that type of stuff, drawings. And you know, we do need to know where you're at from a budgeting perspective. You know, spreadsheets still have a really strong place in my opinion. I do a lot of my stuff on spreadsheets, and I would say, you know, have a chat to a few different sort of consultants and advisors in that perspective to see what they would recommend. They may be able to even give you a template that you can use. And then I would say the key thing when you are looking at the budgeting is making sure that what it is that you're doing is realistic. So it aligns to sort of where you're starting from with the respect of the last 3 to 5 years of accounts that you're going to be giving the bank, and that it makes sense sort of where you are heading to in terms of the stages. And, you know, a budget in reality is only worth the paper it's written on the day it's written on. None of us are fortune tellers, but it does give us a best guess. And, you know, we do adapt it as we go throughout the year, as and when things change. That's the whole point of forecasting, in my opinion, is that you do sort of take stock and sort of reforecast out to see where we're going to go. If you're preparing it for the bank, putting it in the drawer once you're done, that's not a great thing from my perspective. You really need to sort of, I don't think you need to sort of carry it around with you in your pocket and really like sort of tick off everything line by line. But no, again, when you're sitting down at your monthly meetings or however frequent you're going to be doing it, going through the budget and saying, all right, where are we at in comparison to where we're going? What may have caused that? And then you're able to, you can answer the questions when I give you a call to find out what's going on, exactly as to, you know, what's happening. And that will give me a lot of confidence that you're sticking close to it. I think especially with volatility, and we have seen a lot of volatility in the last couple of years. We've seen some mega inflation. We've seen, you know, we weren't expecting a war. We weren't expecting a second war. You know, the climate is changing as much as we'd like to think that it's not, and we have to adapt to that. And it is having is having an impact on what's happening behind the farm gate. So, you know, being able to focus on what you can control, which is for the most part costs, what you're spending your money on and how you're spending your money, you know, that is really, really key. Focus on the controllables, and hopefully the uncontrollables then seem a little bit less daunting. But yeah, speak to your professionals is always the best. That is definitely, I said before we started, that's the bankers get out of jail free card, but you know, we are here to help, and you know, just speak to us and ask the questions.
Okay, so speaking of
sorry, could I just add to that actually? When Mel says about that unallocated at the bottom, the systems that are out there at the moment, you know, we see them all advertised on television, and it's going to make your life absolutely easy. It's all automated, you know, and it does put you into a little bit of a position, because it's still only as good as the person putting the figures in, you know. And I've heard from both accountants and consultants, those gathering information for such as a farm business research, you know, that unfortunately the data being collected is a little bit less accurate than it used to be, because we rely on everything being automated, you know. So yeah, you're still needing that little bit of knowledge and information, just to know where everything fits within an account system, you know, the chart of accounts and everything like that.
I think that is so important. As much as we're hoping that AI is the answer to absolutely everything, I do think there is still something to be said for just that overview, human eye, because you know your business better than anyone, and you'll pick up those little odd intricacies that I'm sure a system wouldn't do. But it's
tiny things, even just checking that the closing bank balance is right. You know, and making sure that because that does have an impact sort of at the year end, in particular when you're then providing the next year's budget. No farm business is starting a financial year with zero as their bank balance. You know, there's going to be you're either going to be in credit or you're going to be, you know, in deficit, but you know, you're starting somewhere. But the amount of budgets that I get that have the zero as the opening bank balance, and you know, that just it throws off the cash flow forecasting. So I can't actually properly assess what your cash requirements of your business are going to be. So, you know, how am I meant to sort of help support putting in a working capital facility when we're not actually sure where it's going to end up? So just it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine at the moment, is that closing opening bank balances. So apologies for putting that in there.
No, that's really good. That's really good.
You can tell that.
So coming back then to sort of the professionals that we'd like to rely on, how do you go about considering or finding one of them? I know, Christine, you've already said about systems, don't just pick the one that your neighbor's using, which I think is probably true of professionals as well. But so how do you find them? Where do you go? How do you know that they're any good?
I honestly think it's a very, very simple answer to this one, really, is that because of our industry, just definitely choose or look at accountants and finance companies that specialise in agriculture, you know, especially given current discussions. You know, we've got all the inheritance tax thing going on as well in the background, and everything else since the budget. They know the vulnerabilities of our industry, they know how volatile it is. And so they can give you that best advice with that solid understanding of our weird and wonderful industry, you know, because it is so different to other business models, really. So yeah, just as long as you make sure that they have got the agricultural knowledge, and again, be careful in that as well, because would you believe that anybody can call themselves an accountant nowadays as well? You know, look at the qualifications that they have as well, and just make sure that they are qualified, that they are running true professional businesses, really. But yeah, nothing beats that specialised agricultural knowledge, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
I'd 100% agree with that, Christine. And I would just say as well, like, ask around as well. So ask people that you trust in the industry and interview them. Arrange meetings and sit down and have a chat with them. Again, not everyone is going to be the right fit for you, and if you feel that you're not getting what you want out of them, change or get a second opinion. And that second opinion thing is, I think, really, really important, especially now with changes to IHT and, you know, who else knows what's coming down the line. I think if you've been given advice that you're not sure is 100% right, or you just, you know, you've got a wee niggle, I would say get a second opinion, and if that aligns, bang on. But if it doesn't, then you know that you need to ask a few more questions, or you know, get more advice from somewhere else. But yeah, just ask around. And you know, the other thing as well, on the flip side of that, is you know, if you're taking over an existing business, well, my dad's probably going to kill me for this, but thankfully he's not on the call, so it doesn't matter. My dad used the same. So this is a really good example. My dad used the same shearing gang for 30 years when we were when we were sort of lambing a lot of ewes and stuff like that, and it was because that's who his father had used. And you know, there was a loyalty there to a certain extent. However, things had changed, and the gang leader had got a lot older, so he wasn't doing as much of the shearing himself and was employing other boys to do it and that type of thing, and they weren't as good. And you know, we were starting to see a few more welfare issues, which just is a non-starter for us. So you know, we were put into a really difficult position where Dad had to have these conversations saying, look, it's not good enough, we need better shearers if you're going to be coming here still. And it was only after my grandpa died that he actually officially fired them and sold all the sheep. But you know, it just kind of happened that way. But I would just say, you know, just because, you know, you've used that person for, you know, a long time, doesn't mean that that's the right one for the next generation coming in. Doesn't mean it's the right person for the current situation or the business that you have today or where you're looking to get to. Quite often, you know, people will make an investment and they'll change their professionals at the same time because they're needing an extra layer of advice or a different type of specialism that maybe a larger firm that could provide. And that's the same sort of across all of them: consultants, solicitors, accountants. When it comes to sort of on-farm advice and that type of thing, you do not want a yes person. You want someone that is going to say, why? Why do you want to do that? Have you thought about this? You need to be challenged. Another little bugbear of mine is getting budgets that are all round numbers and, you know, everything is rosy. You know, very, very rarely do I see a budget that doesn't work. But, you know, and I kind of ask, again, you ask the question, you're like, well, you know, the consultant said that's what we could do, so that's what we're going to do. And I'm like, all right, well, how are you going to go from 8,500 litres per cow to 10,500 litres per cow, but not change anything else on the farm? You know, these as questions like that, you know, you've got to understand the numbers that are going into it, and you've got to be challenged. So if you're not getting challenged, I'd say find somebody else.
That's great advice. And I think that there is something probably in this sector about that sort of misguided loyalty, because that's what we've always done. And actually, at the end of the day, this is a business and you have to think like a business. So I think that's really sound advice. But I guess it gets quite uncomfortable, doesn't it? I was just going to ask you, Mel, in terms of, do you have any tips on getting more comfortable preparing for these sorts of financial meetings?
I think it's just... It's hard. I mean, it's I would say it's experience, which is quite a bit of a cop-out answer. But the more you do it, the more comfortable that you're going to feel about it. And I would say, you know, if you're just coming into the business or just starting out, you know, as I suppose I'm talking about a generational, a family business here, but like if you're the next generation coming in and you don't feel 100% comfortable with sort of the finance side of things because, you know, your parents have run that completely and you haven't had any involvement, start sitting down when the bank manager comes out, if you've got one that comes out. If you don't, give us a call. Sorry.
Nice plug.
You know, it's, you know, sit down and be a part of the meetings. Don't just sort of and try and if you're not sure, ask questions at those meetings as well. When the consultant comes around or the agronomist comes around, you know, just ask why. You know, why have you done it like that? And it's just spending time with those people. And you know, at the next VAT return, whoever does the VAT, ask if you can sit with them and go through it. It is just experience, unfortunately. And you know what? If you want, yeah, I'm sure, you know, bank managers will be more than happy to come out and sit in a meeting with you if you need a professional there, just as another pair of ears and eyes. You know, we're able to do that.
Perfect.
Why is such a wonderful word, isn't it? Really, it just doesn't apply.
It's my favourite. Yeah.
To toddlers, it applies to older people as well.
Be that 2-year-old. Why? That said, obviously, we're not always going to get it right. So, Christine, I was going to ask you, what are some sort of basic mistakes that farming businesses make and potentially lose out financially? You know, and I don't know if it's things like VAT or other things that there might actually be a bit of a break for them. Again, maybe if they ask the right questions, but I don't know if you had any examples in terms of the sort of basic errors that maybe are easily avoidable.
You mentioned VAT. It's one of these weird and wonderful things again, in that a lot of people don't actually fully understand VAT. You know, when we're buying things in, it either has VAT on it or it doesn't, and that's how it is. But there is a little bit more to it. If you don't know all the different categories, nobody's going to lock you up or anything like that for getting anything wrong. But it's important to realise that a lot of information goes on, such as that VAT return, that the government use for monitoring trade at the end of the day, you know. So looking at the VAT, I think the most surprising thing that I come across really is that there are a lot of farmers out there who still, when a farming business registers for VAT, Customs and Excise, their standard frequency of returns is quarterly. Okay, and I'm hoping that possibly is to give those businesses who pay VAT the time to arrange that. However, unless there's a diversification business involved within the business, general farming businesses normally reclaim VAT due to our produce going into the food chain and therefore being zero rated. And there aren't many industries like that. HMRC were absolutely really pleased with the take-up of making VAT digital from the farming industry, you know, compared to others. Well, there wasn't really any great surprise because we needed the VAT back to help our cash flow, you know. But yeah, there aren't many other industries who do that. We are finding that there's still a lot of farmers submitting the quarterly returns. When all the figures have been calculated on what we call a cash basis, so that's been, all the figures have been done when payments have been made or when they've been received. However, Customs and Excise standard form of recording is to go on the date of the invoices, whether they've been paid or not. And so with the software systems that are available now, that is really, really easy to handle, you know, so you'll be entering all your information based on the date of the invoice. And you can change the frequency of those VAT returns to monthly. So if you are a general farming business, why would you not change the method of doing the financial recording to that based on the invoice date and submit your returns monthly? You're getting the money back. You know, you're probably getting the money back before you have to pay that huge, massive fertilizer bill, unless you've taken up credit facilities with Oxford. You know, but and it is, you know, everybody says, well, can you really do that? Yes, you can. It is the standard way of doing it. And not only does that help your cash flow, you know, by getting that money back in a little bit sooner, but again, you automatically are able to press a button and find your creditors and debtors. So you're automatically getting that movement of cash a little bit quicker and getting that more information out. You know, if Mel or your accountant drops on you and says, how much do you owe and how much are you owed, you press a button and it's all there. So so regarding VAT, that's the thing that is usually surprising to people.
That's right.
And a lot of people go away saying, that's going to be the first thing that we do when we get home. So yeah, it does help a lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
nice.
suppose if you think about it from a time perspective as well, Christine, it's
Yeah.
a lot less work, looking at a month's worth of returns
Yeah.
versus 3 months worth of returns. So,
Yeah.
And again, it gives that great opportunity to sit down and work out where everyone's at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fresh in everybody's minds. And we always say as well, if you are going to move on to one of the new digital software systems, the more often you use it, the easier it becomes. There's nothing worse than sitting down every 3 months and thinking, how on earth did I do that last time? The more regular you use it, the easier it does become and less time's taken. So
yeah, for sure. So one last question for you, Mel, just in terms of if you are looking to get some money from the bank, loan, what, and without any real detail, what sort of things do you need to have ready when speaking to the bank? Like what risks are you concerned about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what we're looking at, so it's so the key things that we're looking at, I mentioned it before, it's the affordability, the security, but most importantly, we want to know that the people involved are the one, like you've got the skill and the capability to be able to do that. I'm by no means an expert in everything. I would say I'm not even an expert in one thing, to be honest, but I do have a fascination for a lot of things in agriculture. But I suppose the key thing that I'm doing and when I'm out on farm and looking at businesses is I'm probably going out, to hundreds of different businesses a year, getting hundreds of different sets of accounts. That's not an exaggeration. So I have an ability to be able to benchmark, and most bank managers will be able to do this. They can benchmark you against people that they've got on their portfolios that are doing something similar. So I would think the key thing sort of when you're approaching a bank is have your information ready. So as a basic sort of stuff, if you're an existing business, last 3 years accounts and last 3 months bank statements, that's going to be a really helpful start for us to know exactly where you stand. Understand what land you own, if you own land, or understand the tenancy and what your tenancy agreement is. It's amazing, when we sort of discuss if you're an owner occupier, we're asking sort of, okay, so how big is the farm? And they'll be like, 200 acres, great. Get the valuer out, the valuer brings it, the report comes back in and it's 239, and then we send it across to the solicitors and they'll say, well, actually there's a few boundary issues here. It's actually 214. So it's knowing and understanding exactly sort of what you own, to what Christine said, what you owe and who owes you, when they're due as well, and what you're going to do to get that back. If you don't have an existing business and it's a startup sort of venture, bring a business plan with you. And that can be one that you've prepared yourself, and we can always put you in touch with consultants and advisors to help sort of improve on that if we think that's necessary. I would say, not everyone needs to have like a consultant or an advisor. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's what's going to work for you. A lot of people do it through discussion groups and benchmarking and that type of thing, where they can sort of have conversations with peers and understand exactly sort of what is going on for businesses doing similar sort of things to them. So bring in the business plan and bring in a budget, cash flow forecast. And the key thing is the budget needs to have a profit and loss and a cash flow forecast. So profit is great, but profit in the accounts is sometimes being massaged for tax benefits and that type of thing, which is, that's absolutely fine. But cash is king still. And understanding what your cash position is really, really important. Understanding what your cost of production is, regardless of what system you're operating, and what sector you're operating, know how much it costs you to produce whatever it is that you're producing. If you're a multi-enterprise system, sort of what both Christine and I come from, know what each enterprise is doing. Is one propping up the others? Is one costing you a lot more money? Are you doing it just because it's a nice to have type thing rather than a need to have? If you were to sort of, I think, or the other thing as well that I'd say on diversifications and that type of thing, because I know that's been it's a massive sort of thing ever since we left the EU and agricultural policy has changed with subsidy dropping. Is it the right thing to be doing? So for me, it's looking at, is this going to draw your attention away from the main farm business that is actually generating the cash? Or is it something that you can do and it works in tandem quite nicely with that? It's just understanding sort of how everything's going to work together. The one question that I'm going to want to know, though, regardless of what it is why. Like I said before, I want to know
Why?
why you want to do this, what the benefit is going to be, how much it's going to be. So, if, say, for example, you're a dairy farm, you're milking 300 cows and you want to push to 400. Well, what's that extra 100 cows going to bring to you? Tell me in like pence, down to pence per litre, exactly what that benefit is. If it's going to cost you more money, or if you're going to employ more people and actually spend a lot more on wages, is it the right thing to be doing right now? Maybe not.
Yeah.
The neighbour's farm coming on the market is always, that's the one, is always too expensive when it does come up and never comes up again, but is it really the right thing to be doing? Something that we're seeing a lot more now is, there is a real risk around sort of rising sea levels, as much as we'd like to think that there's not. And we are starting to see people do climate mitigation. So selling farms in areas which could present a high flood risk in the future, or, be underwater in the future, and moving somewhere else where they can operate their business. So that type of thing is starting to happen. So yeah, I think the last little bit that is becoming more and more important, and it's not something that is, it's not a hard and fast must at the moment, but I would say definitely, if you've got a farm business at the moment, get a baseline carbon audit done, because more and more people are being asked to do that and show those results. We are required to ask all of our customers if they're completing any carbon auditing.
Okay.
If they do have a carbon audit, can we get that calculator, please? Because under scope 3, we have to report what our emissions are, and that includes, individual employees, the bank as a whole, and our customers. So we need to understand exactly where that is. And if you look at it, if you think about it like this, the supermarket, if they're found out for selling something that is, having a negative impact on the environment, they get the fine, they're not going to hold on to that fine. They're going to pass that on to the processor. The processor isn't going to hold on to it. They're going to pass it on to the farmer. They'll find out exactly where it happened. Traceability is becoming more like, that's getting more and more accurate every year. So it is coming down the line. I would always recommend get ahead of the curve. Sustainability is a word that is thrown around a lot, and anyone could argue, what does it actually mean? From my perspective, sustainability is the environment and what you're doing to sort of protect, improve, promote that. It's about the agronomic performance, and it's about the financial performance. All three of them are interlinked really, really strongly. And if you can sort of look at your business like that, you can sort of, you can make some quick wins really quickly. So yeah, I think the more information that you can provide, the better. Have an idea, have a quick go at working out what you think you can afford. That's always, so I get asked a lot, we want to do this. How much can I borrow? Well, no, I'm not going to tell you how much you can borrow. I'd prefer to know what you think you can borrow, because, that will give me a bit of a guide as to where you think you are. And then we can have a look at the financials and go through it like that. But it is, have an idea, and there's mortgage calculators online that you can use to work out what that repayment's going to be. Have a look at it over different sort of terms and work out sort of what is going to work best for your business.
Yeah. We had a question come through, sorry, Christine, which sort of ties into this, but in terms of how do you manage losses, or how do banks deal with that?
Yeah, so it's understanding what's caused that loss. So, with best example, I suppose, is if we look at the dairy sector over the last 2 years, we've gone from, record high milk prices and a record high cost of production, with cost of production maintained quite high while milk prices have dropped down in the last sort of 18 months. Year-end 23 accounts looked pretty healthy for the most part. There were some good healthy profits and good cash surpluses around in the sector at that point. Year-end 24 didn't look so rosy, because the cost profile was maintained. Interest rates were still high, but milk price was coming down. So, we are seeing more and more loss positions. What we need to understand, is that a sustained problem? So is it something, or is it a one-off?
Yeah.
If it's a one-off, then I'll ask the questions, what's happened? And that's where you need to know exactly what's gone on in your account. So, what has happened to the livestock, or, just stock valuations in general? Have they been adjusted for for tax purposes? What is capital expenditure gone through as repairs into the P&L, you know, and that's reduced profitability. I would say, you know, if you are adjusting accounts for the tax purpose, so it is reflecting a loss, you know, I'd probably try and avoid that personally. Tax avoidance is illegal, by the way. Tax mitigation isn't. As a bank, we do have a requirement to report where we see tax avoidance, and we will do it, no questions asked. So what I would say is, and the thing about that as well is, you know, it's okay to pay tax. It means you're successful at what you do. It's okay, I promise.
That's a nice way to look at it.
It just means you're successful. So, you know, I think it's understanding exactly what has caused that loss. Is it a one-off? Is it because you've had a raft of capex or you know, capital expenditure and investment in that year? So it is sort of, it's not showing a true reflection of where you're actually standing now. And it's understanding what the turnaround is going to be. How are you going to recoup that loss? What is the plan to get sort of back ahead?
Yeah. Looking at those type of things that you mentioned there, Mel, you know, our accountant, before we sort of sit down each year, always sort of says, right, who's going to see these accounts? You know, what are you planning for the future? Who's going to see them? And they do have those bona fide tools in the toolbox to, you know, do certain adjustments. And that's so it just really sort of goes back again to that sort of one set of accounts for the taxman and another for management, doesn't it, really? But I was interested just to hear from Mel about the carbon audit, actually. Any particular, you probably wouldn't be able to sort of to say which ones out there are most suitable, but as a bank requiring these carbon audits, those calculators have been very, very slow to develop for our particular industry, haven't they? Are you seeing an improvement in those calculators now?
Yes and no, I think is the key answer.
I liked the pause there, like,
yes and no. So they definitely are coming on a lot more. I think there's still too many out there. But again, it's doing your research and understanding exactly which one is going to suit your business. Not all of them are going to suit a dairy business. Not all of them are going to suit sheep and beef. Not all of them are going to suit arable. But it's worth just taking some time. I know, I'm not sure, I don't think it's still available at the moment, but I know through the DEFRA Resilience Fund, there was funding available to get a baseline carbon audit done with one of the consultants. So a lot of my clients did take that up and have been, you know, really successful. And those consultants will help sort out which one is right for you. I think the key thing as well is knowing what you're emitting and know what you're sequestering as well. So understanding the actual balance between the two, because quite often when we're getting these audits in, it is only looking at the emissions, or it's only looking at one part of the business. It's not looking at all of it. And then the key thing as well on that is once you've got it, ask the questions as to how you can improve it. You know, what is it that you need to do? And quite often you don't need to spend a lot of money to make an improvement. It's actually going back to basics. And I'd say this for the same with financials as well. It's going back to basics and looking at, you know, what it is you're doing day to day on farm and where you can make those marginal gains.
I'm conscious of time, but there is one very specific question, if we can be really quick and just answer that one, which was just around grants capital schemes. Do they need to be allocated to the balance sheet rather than the P&L? And what tax allowances would they receive? And then will any kind of labour and machinery in implementing schemes like that need to be allocated to capital? Is there a quick answer to that?
Ask your accountant.
It's one of those things where we all default to asking your accountant. Yeah,
right, okay, fine.
In my experience, the grant money itself basically always sits in the profit and loss. It's a little bit different, you know. If you were borrowing some money from Mel to buy a machine, the machine goes in the balance sheet, but there's also a loan against it. But as far as grants are concerned, a lot of the income of that is always really, or what I've seen, is classed as grant income alongside those subsidies within the profit and loss. The actual machinery just sit on the balance sheet and there, but it's some money that you get in that you aren't going to hopefully not have to repay at the end of the day. So yeah.
I feel like we could keep talking for probably another half an hour, but I think we'll leave it there because we are at 6:01 now, and I did promise we would finish on time. So I will thank you both for your time. I think we've given the audience a lot to think about, really, if you're sort of starting out or at the end of your farming career. So it's been really interesting, and thank you so much for your stories and examples. And hopefully, if people still have more questions, please feel free to sort of email them in, and we can have Mel and Christine back for more if there's a demand for that. So thank you everyone who's listening. For those of you again who are TIAH members, we've got some downloadable content all about farming finances, and we've got terminology, sort of cheat sheets and all that sort of thing. So do make use of those. So thank you again for your time, and hopefully we'll see you again for our final webinar next month, all about succession planning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye. Cheerio.
Bye.